Hey guys, Walleye Freak. I am going to try another attempt at making a video here for you all of me tying a jig. This is going to be a 1/16 ounce Marabou jig. So hopefully this will show up a little better this time around. I actually thought I would try with my digital camera versus using the laptop, so hopefully it'll be a little clearer for you. Again, going to just talk real quick. Got yourself a vise here to set your jig up in. Obviously very important. The other things for tools wise that you need is a bobbin to put your thread in. Your thread obviously is needed for wrapping all of your materials to your jig. And then the other tool that I'm going to be utilizing today, two other tools. One is a nice pair of scissors, and then to tie the knot to keep everything together at the end, I use a whip finishing tool. Today I'm going to be tying a 1/16 ounce jig. This is one that I poured and painted. This one is actually a size 6 Eagle Claw 570 hook, and the color of the jig is, it's a watermelon that I lightened up with some chartreuse green. So let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to get our jig set up in our vise and get her tightened down good. That's one of the important things, is to make sure that your jig is in your vise good and tight so it doesn't rotate or move on you while you're trying to tie your materials to the jig. Okay, so we're going to start with our thread, and we need to put down a good base of thread that we're going to take back to about the start of the hook eye there. So what you do is you take your tag end in your loose hand. For me, that's, since I'm right-handed, I take the tag end in my left hand, lay it over top of the hook shank, and then do a couple of wraps, and then start wrapping back over the tag end and wrap back towards the back of the hook, towards the bend, until you get back near to the point of the hook, and then go ahead and clip off your tag end. Do a couple more wraps so that you're right there about even with the hook point, and then come forward. And then, since I'm tying a Marabou jig for you today, what I'm going to do is stop my thread not quite in the middle, but back from the eye, or excuse me, back from the head of the jig somewhat. So the materials we're going to be using today, outside of thread, obviously very important material, is going to be Marabou, and I'm going to be using a light olive Marabou. This is going to be a fairly dark jig, but I'm going to be using a light olive Marabou, and then I'm going to be using a chenille that is actually quite colorful. Don't know how well it's going to turn up on the video, but this is called Bream. It's supposed to be obviously an imitation, or to use for tying imitations for bluegills and so forth. It's got some green and black and gold, and it's a tinsel type, what they call new age chenille. So I've already, in the interest of time, which if you watch my other video, you know I usually run a little over on, I went ahead and selected a Marabou feather ahead of time, and this one I like. You can see it's pretty full in the end. It's not a very big feather, but when you pull down towards the end to where your tail is going to be, you get a nice full tail, a lot of surface area there that will collect water and give the Marabou some lifelike action in the water. So we're going to go ahead and measure off our Marabou, and what you want is, you want a tail that is the length of your jig from the front of the jig head to the back of the hook. So I got lucky here, and that's pretty close to how long I want my tail. I just pull it through there, and then we set that Marabou right on the hook, and I'm going to tie it in right about where I stopped my thread on my wrap back. So pull down on your bobbin, give yourself a little slack in your thread, and you're going to start by making 2 loose wraps, and you want to make sure that your loose wraps are beside one another. They're not over top of one another, very important. And then we're going to go ahead and pull this tight, and what that'll do is that'll cinch your Marabou down on the hook without spinning it. If you try to tighten this by pulling down, what that will do, or if you try to start your Marabou with tight wraps, what happens is it'll just spin around the hook and does not give a really good anchor or a very good appearance for your tail. Okay, so now that we've got our anchor in, we're going to go ahead and we're going to wrap back towards the hook point. Go back as far as we did with our base when we first started, and we're going to get back to even with the hook point there, and then go ahead and wrap back forward, and you're going to come up not quite to the head of the jig, but take up some more of that bulkiness in the front there, and then just go ahead and clip off the excess feather and throw that in your trash. And then at this point, if you have some feathers sticking out, if you want to clean that up a little bit, that's always a good thing to do. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this down, and we're going to go back to about the middle, to the midpoint of the hook shank. And the next thing I'm going to add to this jig is I'm going to add some crystal flash, and I'm going to do that with the pearl again. And what I like to do is get about 4 strands of the crystal flash. I don't like to make my flash there overbearing. The idea is to add a little more realism with the reflection of the light in the water. It actually makes the jig look like it's moving because of the reflection of the light off of the crystal flash, even if the jig is holding completely still. So we've got our crystal flash, and what we want to do is anchor that in on this side of the jig first. I want it to run down the side of the jig to kind of emulate the lateral line, if you will, on the fish. So the easiest way, or the best way to do this is, I hope this shows up, but when you take your crystal flash in your fingers, you want to run it down past the shank of the hook. And when you pull your thread up, what that will do in the process of tightening that crystal flash around, it will actually rotate the crystal flash up so that it is parallel with the hook shank. Then go ahead and wrap back towards where you wrapped your marabou, where you stopped your threads for your marabou. And then at this point we're going to go ahead and we're going to clip off that crystal flash even with the end of the tail. And then go ahead and wrap back forward to get us back up here in the midpoint, and then we're going to rotate our vise around, and we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're going to take the flash, hold it down there, let the thread pull it up parallel to the shank, and then wrap back. And make sure, you want to be careful here, you don't want to go past where you wrapped the other one, because what will happen is that will then turn that marabou, or excuse me, the crystal flash. It'll spin it around, and I don't want to do that. I like to have my crystal flash kind of, like I said earlier, emulate the lateral lines of the fish by running down the side. So we're going to go ahead and clip off our excess here. Slipped out of my fingers. And then we're going to spin this around and go ahead and tie that in. And now the next part is we're going to be tying in, and look at that, I went ahead and spun that around, and that's one of the things you'll notice, the marabou will actually pull it down too if you're not too careful. So that's pretty close to where I want it. Next is going to be adding our chenille, and what I like to do is take about a 4 to 5 inch piece of chenille and clip it off from the main package. And then the first thing you do is you want to take and you want to pull a little of the chenille off of the end so that you're exposing that thread there at the end, because that thread is going to be what your actual anchor is. So come back here to the end of the thread where you had stopped for both your crystal flash and for your marabou, and then you want to do a loose wrap and catch that thread, and then do a couple, tighten her down, and then go forward with your bobbin. And then I have a bobbin holder on my vise which allows me to get that out of the way. So now the next part is you're going to take and you're going to palmer your chenille forward. Now the reason that I did the stripping there of that thread as I got started on the chenille is you don't want to tie directly to the chenille as you apply it to the jig, because if you do, it adds a little extra bulk back there that, doesn't look natural, if you will, because the idea is we're trying to emulate a bait fish of some kind with our jigs as we tie them. So to cut down on the unnecessary bulkiness, to make a jig look a little better in proportion, you just strip that thread off and then you tie that thread straight to your hook shank. So now I've palmered my chenille all the way forward, and I'm going to go ahead and get my bobbin set back down here. And your last wrap of chenille goes around the jig head, and then it's towards you in front of your bobbin, and then you want to pull that to where it's facing out the front of the jig. You now are going to take your thread and you're going to do one wrap around, and what you want to try to do is try to make sure that you get that thread to wrap between the jig head and the chenille. Just it helps to ensure that the thread will get down to the shank of the hook instead of binding and getting bound up on the chenille itself. So you do 2 wraps in there, you get her pulled down good and tight, and then fold the chenille back and do 2 more wraps, and then at this point your little tag in or excess chenille you have, go ahead and clip that off. And at this point we are mostly done. We have the last couple wraps to do here, and then we'll get our whip finish tool and we'll throw a couple whip finish knots on here, pull it nice and snug. That was the first one, and we'll just do 2 doubles, and then that'll be more than enough. And then clip off your thread up nice and close to the jig head, and there you have it. A 1/16 ounce Marabou jig that is tied with an olive color marabou and a new age chenille that is called brim, obviously to imitate a bluegill. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you were able to learn something from it, and if you want, just let me know and I can try to make some more, tying up some other things. Thanks. Bye.